Hey guys, so I wanted to pop on and talk to you guys about my Omnipod. Hey guys, so I wanted to get on and do a 1-year review of my Omnipod. It's been a year that I have been on the Omnipod, and I wanted to talk to you guys about that. It's been just under a year. Today is, when I'm filming this, is February the 9th, and I started the Omnipod on February the 15th, so pretty close to a year. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Omnipod, it is a tubeless, and I use that in air quotes because there is obviously a tube, a cannulus, that does need to be inserted in you. And this is a used Omnipod that I have here, just to show, there we go, to show what the cannulus looks like. So most insulin pumps have a tubing that is much longer. The Omnipod sticks on you, and I will show you where mine is at the moment. So this is where my Omnipod currently sits. So it's on my stomach. That is one of my favorite placements. So that's what the Omnipod looks like when it's on. I have shown another video of that, but yes. And then this is what the Omnipod looks like once it's been used. And Omnipod does have a recycling program, which I like. I think it's a great idea and a great initiative for them to have. So I will show you, this is what a box looks like. This is an empty box because I just got a new one. This is what it looks like. I actually have one in here because I did want to show you guys. So the Omnipod does need to be replaced every 3 days, or 72 hours is the timing on that. So that's how often I replace my Omnipod. And this is what it looks like in the packaging. So what they give you, and I'll just open this up and put it aside for my next change. So this is what the Omnipod looks like. I'm gonna go there. That's what it looks like. There we go. When it's new, this is obviously a adhesive sticker to keep it covered. And then this covers up where the cannulus goes in. And then the other thing that is given with the Omnipod is, of course, the needle to insert. I do have a video of me doing the Omnipod application along with my Freestyle Libre, so I will link that below if you have not seen it. Go ahead and watch it. It is fairly in-depth, but yes, this is what the pods look like before they are used. Okay, now something else that I wanted to talk about with regards to my Omnipod as well as my Libre, I do use some additional adhesives to keep them sticking. Now, when I first started the Omnipod, it did stick fairly well, and different times of the year, depending on how dry my skin is and whatnot, and where I place it, sometimes I can get away with it, and sometimes without using adhesive, and sometimes I can't. I tend to err on the side of caution. I like them to be more sticky than less sticky because basically I don't want it falling off, which I did have a couple of times. But Omnipod customer service is phenomenal. So if something doesn't stick to you, it falls off. As long as you're preparing your skin right, they do ask you your routine and everything, how you're preparing your skin. So basically, most of the time you need to be using an alcohol swab on that area, and or one of the things, generally speaking, I will try to time my pod replacement around a time that I'm going to take a shower and be completely, you know, naked or without my pump for a little while, without the pod on me, and then I wash it and wash my body and dry off. But I still, just because I did have some issues, I still, prior to putting a pod on, I still will use an alcohol swab on the area that I'm going to put a pod on. And then what I will follow up with is the skin tack wipes. These are the ones that I have found work best for me in terms of keeping the adhesive on longer. And then the skin tack away I use for any of the residual adhesive that's left over. It pretty much gets it off. So that's kind of what I use. Now, in terms of why I like my Omnipod so much, so I will say that I absolutely love the Omnipod. And one of the reasons is because of what it's done for my A1C. January 20th of 2017, I had my A1C done, so this is before I started the Omnipod, and my A1C at the time was 0.074, which obviously anything over 6.9, you're considered not controlled. I was still relatively new in my diagnosis, I would say, but I was not controlled, basically. And then I had an A1C done in April, so it was April 18th of 2017 that I had my A1C done, and it was actually my best A1C reading to date. It's 0.067 was my A1C reading, basically after, that's about 3 months on the Omnipod. So clearly it had a great effect on my control, and it helped bring down my A1C significantly. Is my PDM, little dirty, but the PDM is what controls the delivery of the insulin. So what I mean by that is it's where you're able to set your basal and bolus and whatnot. And this is another reason why I am such a huge fan. And this is not just specific to the Omnipod. This is specific to all insulin pumps regardless. When I was doing daily injections with the needles, I was able to get a needle that measured in half units of insulin, which for me, that helped a lot. Because it really depends. Within the first year or two, it depends on the person. I've heard different people say longer. You can still be what's called honeymooning, which means your pancreas is still producing small amounts of insulin. And for me, that would mean lesser insulin requirements, right? Because my body's still producing insulin naturally, or it was. So one of the things that I really liked about the Omnipod, and again, this goes for any insulin pump, I don't know if it's exactly the same measurements, but I would think so. You can give yourself very minute amounts of insulin. So with the Omnipod, the smallest amount of insulin that I can give myself is 0.05. So with an insulin needle, it's 0.5 units of insulin. So if you think about that, it's 1/10 of the amount of insulin. That's the smallest dose of insulin that I could give myself. And for me, the ability to do that is hugely important. That really allows you to bolus more accurately, and then also create basal rates that are more accurate. So my current basal rate, I have mentioned that I am on a keto diet, so my basal rates have gone down. My current basal rate is between 0.35 to 3.0 per hour. That's on my keto basal rate. Now, sometimes throughout the month, I do need to change that when I am ovulating, prior to menstruation, right after menstruation. So there's all these times. But with the Omnipod, it is super easy to make these adjustments. And it was very easy for me to understand how to do it. And I will say I have one of the best advanced nurse practitioners out there who also happens to be a type 1 diabetic herself and who also happens to be on the Omnipod. She didn't sway me either way. When I asked about getting an insulin pump, she told me about all of them. I had met a guy that was on the Omnipod and talked to him, and he basically said he loved it as well too. So that, and I did not want a long tubing around me. That was another big reason why I chose the Omnipod. So yes, you're able to give yourself much more accurate doses of insulin, and that is a huge reason why I love my Omnipod. So I hope this was helpful. There's basically pros and cons to any mode of giving yourself insulin, right? I do have something attached to me all the time, and I know there's people out there that would bother them. The trade-off for me is that I have better control of my diabetes. I feel like I have much better control with this, which is not something I thought initially. I am kind of a control freak, and I thought I didn't want something giving me insulin without my say-so, I guess. But at the end of the day, it is my say-so, because I'm the one that's programming the basal rate, and then when I'm going to bolus at a meal, I'm the one that's looking at the calculation. That's the other thing too, is it does assist in calculations. If you know what your ratio is, like for example, my ratio of insulin to carbs is I give myself 1 unit of insulin for every 15 grams of carbs. That's my ratio that I work with, and works with me for boluses most of the time. But being able to eat meals now where I have 5 grams of carbs, what would I do? If I was on a pen needle, that's less than half a unit of insulin. How would I bolus for that? The other thing that I have a very strong belief on is the long-acting insulin wasn't working for me. It was unpredictable. I never found the long-acting insulin to be a high level of predictability. And on the Omnipod or any insulin pump, you're only using fast-acting insulin, and I believe that's helped me the most. I believe that the fast-acting insulin is more consistent, and I have a better understanding of how it works, metabolizes in my body. So that, again, would go to any insulin pump that you're using. But for myself, the major reasons why I selected the Omnipod is that I didn't want a big amount of tubing wrapped around me. I can be klutzy, and I felt like I would for sure have, on more than one occasion, had sites that I ripped it out. One of the disadvantages, and this is like a very mild disadvantage, is I mean, I don't have a hot tub all the time or have access to a hot tub all the time. But if you have the Omnipod on someplace and you are potentially going to be going into a hot tub, it could spoil the insulin. So if I want to be in a hot tub, I kind of have to plan it out, like, or have some idea in my mind that, oh yes, I might potentially want a hot tub on this day or that day. And what I do when I'm in a hot tub is I just end up putting my pod on the back of my arm, and then I keep that arm out of the hot tub. So, or sometimes the other option is that I can also time it for when I would need to change my pod and then take my pod off, and for whatever, the hour that I'm soaking in a hot tub, that pod is not on me, and that's not a big deal. And it's not like, that's not a huge thing. In terms of the water, resistance. I believe the Omnipod is water resistant for up to an hour. And we'll see. With my trip to Mexico, I did get extra adhesive to have it last longer. But that's, for me, that's a minor con with the Omnipod. But I really love my Omnipod, and I'm a huge advocate for not just Omnipod, but insulin pump in general. I think that you can get better controls with it, and I feel like you're able to give yourself more accurate doses of insulin with an insulin pump, and you're able to basically ensure that you're not going high as often and low. Now, all type 1 diabetics know there's no perfect, but for me, I feel like the Omnipod has been pretty perfect in terms of helping me control my diabetes. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions for me regarding the Omnipod, please put them down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my videos, subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell to get an email every time I upload a video. Thank you and have a great day.